And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Bible Study, Midweek Bible Study. It is Wednesday, the 5th of January. I'm Mike Carey, pastor of the First United Methodist Church in Nevada, Iowa, on a cold, windy old day. The wind is still roaring out there, and somebody up in South Dakota, I think, left the back door open, and so the cold air is making its way down here. But being good, hearty Iowegians that you all are, or at least most of you watching this are, we will be able to handle it. We will take care of things, and we will just keep right on trucking, right on down the road. So we are in the Gospel of Luke this afternoon. It's 2 o'clock. Yes, I have a clock down here in my lower right-hand corner of my machine, so I can see what time it is. I just misspoke there. But we are in Luke's Gospel, and it's chapter 7, starting at verse 1, if you're following along in your own Bible, your own translation, which I hope you are. But here we go. Now, when Jesus had completed all of his words in the hearing of the people, he went to Capernaum. The servant of a certain centurion was so ill that he was going to die, and he was very dear to him. When he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him and asked him to come and save his servant's life. So they came to Jesus and strenuously urged him to come. He is, they said, a man who deserves that you should do this for him, for he loves our nation and has himself built us a synagogue. So Jesus went with them. And when he was now quite near the house, the centurion sent friends to him. Sir, he said, do not trouble yourself. I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, nor do I count myself fit to come to you. But just speak a word, and my servant will be cured. For I myself am a man under orders, and I have soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And I say to my servants, do this, and he does it. Now when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at this man. And he turned to the crowd who were following to him and said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And those who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant completely cured. Interesting story. There are some stories, this one and the next one, that Luke tells in a unique way to the gospel writers. In fact, in the story that's to follow this one, it is a completely unique to Luke material and story. But we'll get into that in a minute here. But this story, let's consider the characters and what's going on here. First, you have the centurion. Now, a centurion was the equivalent of a sergeant who's in charge of a group of men, maybe even beyond our common idea of a sergeant, maybe of a lieutenant who's in charge of at least a platoon of men. He has a good number of men under him. A centurion in the Roman legions was a very unique individual. In fact, all the historical material that we can garner tells us that the Roman army, the Roman legions, basically was built on with the centurions as the backbone to everything that they did. Centurions are individuals who, whenever we see them in the New Testament, and they make several appearances, they are always spoken of very highly as very, very good individuals. Polybus, the historian, gives us a description of what the qualities of a centurion were supposed to be. I'm going to read what he says here. He says that they are not so much to be seekers after danger as men who can command, steady in action, reliable. They ought not to be over anxious to rush into a fight, but when hard pressed, they must be ready to hold their ground and die at their posts. So centurions, and the Romans had very high standards for their officers and for their legionnaires, and especially for their centurions, because they were the boots on the ground. They were the ones that were leading the legions and the various groups into battle, and they were also those that were out and around when you had occupied territory. They were the ones that were, again, dealing with the day-to-day situations that very much determined whether or not there was going to be peace in that particular area or there was not going to be peace. Now, this individual, so he's a centurion. Well, what kind of a centurion is he? While the Romans had very stringent qualifications, not all centurions are created equal. Like, not all people are created equal. Not all ministers are created equal. This one was a very unusual man. First of all, he has a completely unusual attitude about his servant. According to Roman law, servants were property, just like an animal. They were there to be used, and you could kill your servants without any repercussions whatsoever in the old Roman Empire. One ancient writing that we have is basically a farm manager giving advice to farmers in Italy. And he tells them that every year you should go through your tools, and if you have them that are worn or broken, you should throw them away. And you should also do the same thing with your servants and slaves. Get rid of them. If they are no longer able to complete or perform the tasks for which you have bought them, well, then get rid of them. They're dead weight. And so the attitude most commonly held towards slaves, servants by Romans, was persona non grata. You're a non-person, you are a tool, and you are here to do whatever it is that I tell you to do. So the attitude that this particular centurion had towards his servant, that says that he cared for his servant greatly and that he was willing to do just about anything to save his life, is very uncommon. So this is a man of compassion, of caring. He's also a deeply religious man. He is more than just casually interested in what's going on around him. He's not thinking, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, when in Palestine, do as the Palestinians do, or the Jews do. He has convinced the elders, Jewish elders of the area, that he genuinely cares about them and he's interested in them, to the point where he has put his money where his mouth is, and he's built them a synagogue. That's very unusual. Centurions were not especially people of means. They would have Roman taxation funds available to them to a limited degree. So for this guy to go to the time and the effort and the expense to build a synagogue for the Jews, money talks. And if he was willing to put his money where his mouth was, they thought very, very highly of this guy. And they say that as much to Jesus. So he's a deeply religious man. Now, that can mean many things. Many modes of spirituality or religion were there in Rome back in those days. Most Romans considered all religions to be either equally true or equally false. One particular saying in Rome was that by the philosopher, all religions were considered equally false, and to the magistrate, they were all equally useful. That's because Roman emperors in particular, saw religion as the glue that helped hold the empire together. And that's one reason why the Romans, in many ways, were spiritually tolerant of allowing the locals to have whatever religion they wanted, as long as once a year they would offer a pinch of incense to the Roman emperor, because the Roman emperors claimed to be gods. And so they considered that commonality as binding people together. One of the credos of communism is that religion is the opiate of the people. Well, that wasn't original with Karl Marx. That that goes back a long ways, because that was the attitude of the Romans. That religion was the opiate of the people. It kept the people calm. It kept the people in their place and contented. As long as they felt like they had that particular freedom, the freedom of religion, they would be happy. So, but this guy is genuinely religious and is interested in Judaism. He might even be considered to be what was called a God-fearer. In other words, he had not embraced all the aspects of Judaism, but he still worshiped the God of Judaism. And so he would not have accepted the dietary restrictions or being circumcised or anything like that. But there would have been a place for him at the temple, because the outermost court of the temple in Jerusalem was called the court of the Gentiles. And they could come that far and no closer. But that was for what they called God-fearers, those who wanted to worship the Jewish God, but that's as far as they wanted to go. That was as much as they wanted to do. So this guy seems to be on that level. Now, he also seems to have an extremely different attitude about the Jews. Anti-Semitism, as we see it today, as we've seen it over the years, is nothing new. The Jews were manifestly hated throughout most civilizations for a number of different reasons. But this guy, the Romans considered the Jews to be barbarous, superstitious individuals. They accused them of worshiping a donkey's head and sacrificing, human sacrifice, and that kind of thing. But then there were also Romans who were tired of the panoply of gods that the Roman Godhead consisted of. The Roman gods were the same pretty much as Greek gods, Greek mythology, only they gave them Roman names. Zeus became Jupiter, that kind of thing. Hermes became Mars, those kinds of things. Poseidon became Neptune, but there were Romans that became tired of that, and tired of the ethical laxness that was there and part of that religion. And many of them would embrace Judaism, because Judaism had a very strict ethical standard, and they liked that appealed to a lot of people. And so this may well be one of those guys who has tired of the Roman ways of religion and has gone to embrace at least some aspects of Judaism. He is also a very humble man. He knew Jewish law. He knew that it was not acceptable for him to go and talk directly to a Jew, especially somebody like an itinerant teacher like Jesus. And so he asked the local Jewish elders of the synagogue to approach Jesus for him on behalf of healing his servant. And when Jesus is getting close, he sends out friends to say, I am not worthy of you being under my roof. So he knows that it's not allowed in Judaism for Jews to go into the homes of Gentiles, and especially to eat with them or really to speak with them, have anything to do with them. And so he understands that, and he embraces it, which says he is a man who not only understands the situation, but he accepts it with humility and honors it, respects it. So this is an interesting guy. He's also now a man of faith. Now, we talked about him as a religious man. You can be a religious person and not be a person of faith. Now, we'll say, what's the difference there? Well, you can believe in God, but even the demons believe in God and tremble. That's what the scripture says. And so you can be deeply religious, but are you truly a person of faith? And this guy is a person of faith. He says, I believe, I know that if you say the word, my servant will be healed. That's all I ask you to do. You don't need to come here to me. I am not worthy of you coming into my house. Just say the word. And Jesus is amazed, just awestruck by this guy. So I haven't found faith like this in all of Israel, which might have not made the Jews very happy when they heard that. But this guy was basically saying to Jesus, I know you can do this. Just say the word, and I know it will be done. I understand authority. I'm a man of authority. I have servants, I have soldiers, and they do what I tell them. And I know that you are that kind of person. You are a person of authority. So just say the word, and it's done. And it's a wonderful miracle. It's a wonderful story, but it shows Jesus had dealings with the Gentiles, with people that were non-Jewish, and which is interesting. This takes us now to verse 11 of chapter 7. This is a great story. I love this story. It is unique to Luke. No other gospel writer tells this story. Next, after that, Jesus was on his way to a town called Nain, Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd accompanied him on the journey. When he came near the gate of the town, now look you, a man who had died was being carried out to burial. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. And there was a great crowd of townspeople with her. And when the Lord saw her, he was moved to the depths of his heart for her, and said to her, Don't go on weeping. And he went up and touched the briar. And those who were carrying it stood still. They stopped and stood still. And Jesus said, Young man, I tell you, arise. And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And he gave him back to his mother. And awe gripped them all, and they glorified God, saying, A great prophet has been raised up among us, and God has graciously visited his people. This story about him then went out to all of Judea and all the surrounding countryside. Now, here we have a situation. You got two crowds, one coming into town, the town of Nain, which is, by the way, where the prophet in the Old Testament, Elijah, did some working as well. And so they have a history of this, and that's why they're saying a great prophet has arisen. And so you have Jesus and his followers coming in, and you got the funeral procession going out, which would have been preceded by the mourners, the professional wailers, who carry on screaming and making a commotion. Supposedly, the richer you were, the more wailers you had, the more mourning that there was for you. He's being carried on a bier. They did not use coffins back then, and they did not bury people usually. That's why they had tombs, because the soil is so shallow. Sometimes it's only a few inches deep and you hit limestone. And so, but he's being carried out now. And Jesus, again, we see, is moved with compassion for the scene. Jesus is always moved with compassion at the sign of human suffering, whether it be a physical illness, an emotional loss. Here, the black dog of death again confronts the situation, and Jesus is dealing with it here with this woman, and he is moved with compassion now, and he acts. Now, first of all, he addresses the woman and says, Stop your weeping. You don't need to cry anymore. Well, at that moment, you could look around and say, What in the world are you talking about? I'm a widow. I'm alone now. This is my only child, and he's dead. What do you mean, don't weep? It's not only weeping and mourning my loss, it's weeping what's going to become of me, what's going to happen to me. So she's standing there looking into the great unknown. And right there in front of her is the black dog of death. So Jesus touches the briar, it says, and the people that are bearing it stop. Apparently, he doesn't say a word, doesn't need to. He just simply touches it. Now, I believe, personally, that in these kinds of situations and confrontations, there are two things going on. There is what you and I can see, which is Jesus stopping the processional and simply saying to the young man, rise up. And there's also the unseen, the spiritual warfare that's going on. I believe the black dog of death, the demon of death, the angel of death, was there on top of that briar, on top of that young man. And he probably sneered at Jesus. You can't have him. I've already got him. He belongs to me. Go on about your business. And Jesus' reply is, not today. Not today do you get your way. Because I'm not only the Lord of life, I am the Lord of death as well. And you can't have him. I'm taking him back. And he did. Jesus is the Lord of life, but Jesus is also the Lord of death. And that is one reason why, as Christians, we need not fear death. You know, all of us are going to die, as Hank Williams wrote the last song he recorded before he died himself. No one gets out of this world alive. And none of us do in that sense, not in terms of this body. But I do get out of this world alive in terms of the real me, in terms of my spirit, and which God will preserve in Christ forever and ever. So this is a story, a parable of Jesus responding to human need with compassion, banishing the black dog of death, and giving the young man back to his mother. Now, how it says young man, so, you know, an older teenager in his 20s, you know, how old was his mother at that point in time? We don't know. But simply it suggests that Jesus was compassionate to the need of the moment. And he gave that woman back what she needed, what she wanted most, which was her son. I don't find just comfort in that story. I find encouragement simply because Jesus is the Lord over death too. And death shall not reign over us. We shall be victorious. We are the Easter people. We are risen with him. We will be risen with him forever. And that, my friends, is good news for us today. So I see I'm way out of time, way over time here today. So blessings on you as you go about your day. Stay out of the wind, stay warm, and we'll see you next time, Monday, 2 o'clock. Until then, hope the Lord blesses you real good.